Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Innovating the Future of Housing. This session is part of the fourth annual Rising Economy Conference hosted by the South Island Prosperity Partnership. My name is Kathy Witcher, and I'm the Executive Director of the Urban Development Institute Capital Region here in Victoria. As a member and a huge supporter of CIP, I am very happy to see that along with their amazing work of bolstering our economy, that CIP recognizes that housing is a huge component of that. If we want our businesses to thrive, they need somewhere to live. So I'm super happy to see that this session is taking place today. In a couple minutes, I'm going to pass it over to speakers, but just a quick overview of the format today. So about halfway through the conversation, we're going to be taking questions for our speakers. You can submit your questions through the Zoom Q&A below. And this session is also being recorded, so your questions can be taken anonymously if you prefer. To interact with the attendees, you can use the Zoom or Whova chat. And the production team will monitor the Whova chat and the Q&A for those of us joining through the app. And finally, if you're posting your takeaways to social media, please use the hashtag Rising Economy Week 2024. So to introduce our moderator today is Lisa Helps, the former two-term mayor of Victoria, BC, and former co-chair of the BC Urban Mayors Caucus. Lisa is currently working as executive lead, BC Builds project origination and process innovation at BC Housing. Previously, Lisa was the Housing Solutions Advisor for Premier Eby for the startup of BC Builds, which is a new housing program that uses public land, low-cost financing, and other innovative tools to get more housing built more quickly for working people in BC. So Lisa, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks very much, Kathy, for the introduction. And I'm going to invite our Fireside chat participants, Oliver and Robert, to turn on their cameras as well. And we will dive right into the session. So as you can see, the title of the session is Innovating the Future of Housing. Before I introduce Oliver and Robert and bombard them with questions, I would like to just first acknowledge that there is no housing without land. And the land that all of us in this province, in this country, are situated on is the homelands of various First Nations. And I am today on the homelands of the Lekwungen-speaking people, the Songhees and the Esquimalt Nations. And so just really wanted to begin in a good way, hold my hands up to them and acknowledge the lands where I'm coming from today. So as you can see, we have with us Oliver Lang, who is the CEO of Intelligent City, and Robert Barnard, who's the Executive Director of Youthful Cities. And we are going to be involved in a conversation with each other first, and then with all of you. Just so everyone knows, there was no preliminary meeting. We don't have any preset questions. So you're kind of, and we don't know each other. So you're experiencing our meeting for the first time. And hopefully that's a lively and energetic way to spend your Friday afternoon. As Kathy said, at about halftime, we will turn to questions from all of you, but you can feel free to pop them into the Q&A or the chat or the Whova app as they occur to you. Don't wait for that potentially awkward silence where we say any questions, and then everyone needs to do some thinking time. So feel free to think right along with us. So I am going to start with a very broad and open question for each of you. And Robert, I'll start with you. And maybe you could just begin by telling us a little bit about what you do, but almost more importantly, why you do it. And then Oliver, the same questions coming to you. So Robert, what do you do and why do you do it?
Well, Executive Director of Youthful Cities. So Youthful Cities in a line is about creating data-driven solutions that make cities more youthful places. So just to unpack that a little bit, we collect a lot of data on cities in Canada and around the world. That data is all about how cities interact with young people and vice versa. When I say young people, we're looking at sort of 15 to 29-year-olds primarily. And we're using that data to create rankings of cities, to tell stories about cities, to gather people, young people primarily, to develop opportunities that they think they want to work on in cities. And then in the sort of classic think and do tank, we actually want to launch solutions. So the why I do it is actually that last part. It's the do part. So it's great to have data, and we've got great data. It's great to tell great stories, but if we can't change cities and get things moving in a direction that's going to be favorable for the next generation, then we're all in trouble. So that's why I do it.
Perfect. Before I go to Robert, or before I go to Oliver, Robert, why do we need more youthful cities?
I think on number that's a different answer in different places in the world, but in Canada, if you look back 50 years, the average age of the population was 27 years old. So it was basically youth population. Now it's 42. And if we want to continue to do our economic progress, if we want to build better cities, we actually need to engage young people in that development. We need to find houses for them. We need to find jobs for them. We need to make sure that they're in good shape from a health standpoint. And all those build up the reason to build youthful cities.
Perfect. So basically to avoid stagnation, really.
Yeah, I mean, the opposite of youthful cities is atrophy. So take your pick.
Yeah, that's great. Oliver, what about you? Tell us about what you do and why you do it.
Well, first, Kathy, Lisa, and everybody at Rising Economy, thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you. I'm the co-founder, CEO of Intelligent City, which is an urban housing technology company. And we started the company because we identified 3 really significant problems that in a way affect all of us, that are not just local problems, but in a way they're actually global problems. One is housing affordability and supply. One is climate change, and one is in the sector that we're in, a fundamental lack of productivity gain over the last 75 years in the sector of construction, on the sector of development, because the sector has really been incredibly resistant to adapt and adopt innovation, use latest sets of technologies that can help us to overcome some of these problems, the other 2 problems that I've identified. So we started the company really from the side of deep vertical integration, where we bring together design engineering, advanced building systems. We almost exclusively work with mass timber as a solution, advanced manufacturing, sort of industry 4.0, and robotics, where we have just now spent a development cycle to fully commission a factory here in Delta, BC, that's sort of in a way a first of its kind in this country and maybe on this continent, that use advanced robotics to create mass timber building systems. And we have done so in a way that we can really address what we call sort of the emerging missing middle of 15-minute city. So anything from 6 to 18 stories right now that we feel is a very heavily underdeveloped scale in the urban housing landscape. And it's beautifully sort of coinciding with the trends towards urban densification around urban arteries and rapid transit hubs, with the demand for that 6 to 18 story scale is coinciding with new building codes around mass timber. So in BC in 2019, we've adopted what was called the Encapsulate Mass Timber Code, and that sort of spread like wildfire across Canada, also across the United States now, that allow us basically to use engineered timber product or cross-laminated timber product in an application to build that scale where we're really replacing concrete and replacing on-site construction with off-site construction.
Why do you do it? What gets you out of bed every morning?
Well, I think we really want to create better housing for people. We want to empower people to live better. We want to have people to have a good life in cities. We want people to have affordable homes that they're happy with, that they're excited about, that are stopgap measures. It's been a very promising journey to help transform this industry and really create an alternative way here.
Thank you. I've got a follow-up question for you, but Robert, I also saw you nodding while Oliver was talking. So while I'm asking my follow-up question, if you want to formulate a question for him, that's great. So very, very interesting to me. And this is a space that I'm increasingly working in through BC Builds, is a building innovation space. And you referred to Intelligent City as an urban housing technology company. And housing technology company is not something we're used to hearing. And you also said, and this is to me fascinating, that there's been a lack of productivity improvement and a resistance to adapting new practices in the construction industry over the last 75 years. So why is that? Aren't businesses always wanting to get more productive? Aren't they always wanting to have a better return on the investment that they're putting into their products, whether it's their labor or otherwise? So we don't, we don't want to go down a whole history of building for the 20th century, but why do you think there is that resistance? And given the idea that businesses are supposed to want to be more productive, why have we not seen productivity gains in the construction industry over the last 7 decades or more?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. It's a very complex, layered question. Ultimately, the answer is complex and layered in it. I can refer everybody to maybe have a look. The McKinsey Global Institute and also the World Economic Forum in 2016, 2017 published sort of extensive studies on this topic that are very, very insightful. And at the end, I think if I sort of summarize a little bit, why our technology is not being adopted has a lot to do with the incumbent models. The incumbent models are basically that every single building is an individually engineered, individually designed solution. And that tracks to everything. That works how the consultants work, how the owners think about their property, how municipalities approve project by project with building permit per building permit. Everything is around basically a model where every participant in the current industry has arranged themselves happily or unhappily in this old model. And given that, when you build buildings, even a small residential building in this market right now cost upwards of $20 million, could be 50, could be $100 million. A lot of capital is at risk. And, therefore people are very risk averse, and for good reasons that we really appreciate. And so it's very difficult to incrementally innovate things in our sector, because it's a very, very slow process, right? I mean, a little bit of digital tools have been introduced, some minor amounts of prefabrication, but given the 75-year cycle really that we're looking back at, it's not a lot of gain. And again, the World Economic Forum and the McKinsey Global Institute have concluded that the construction sector has the lowest productivity gain out of any sector, industrial sector that's out there. And that is really because there's no good, deep understanding how you could change the models and what kind of transformative innovation you need to go from one paradigm to another. And so that's what we got into. And, I think at the end, it has a lot to do with risk, perceived risk, and people are happier to be clobbered with change orders and delays than engaging with potentially doing something new.
Okay, yeah, it is definitely a big challenge, and I think one that that we need to crack. And I've got some questions coming up about innovation and risk. But before I actually turn to solutions, Robert, anything that you were nodding and interested while Oliver was talking?
Well,
yeah.
First, I just want to jump to solutions because of that do tank part. But I mean, I agree with Oliver. I think that paradigm shift is that, I often go back to simple things when we talked to a lot of young people across the country, and often we ask them, do you think you're going to own your own home? When they think of that question, they think of a single family home, right? That we all do. Like, we've been trained to do that all our life. That's kind of the way we've been doing it. When Oliver's talking about 10 to 15 stories and the missing middle, those are all fantastic solutions. But I think, in Canada, North America, we have this obsession with a single family home. And because of that, we kind of replicate the old models over and over and over and over and over again. And it means we're resistant to some of those new paradigms that say, maybe we can get people into different places. Maybe we can find new ways. Maybe we can prefab and design things in a way that we can build it faster and better. But I think we're sort of stuck in that old paradigm.
All right, so let's transform ourselves or transport ourselves immediately into a new paradigm, which Youthful Cities is putting forward, where we're going to have young people living in reconfigured office buildings. So it's called Cohab, and if anyone hasn't, maybe the Rising Economy folks could put Robert's video into the chat, or just Google it, Cohab Youthful Cities, and you'll probably find the video. But tell us about this, Robert. What is Cohab? How are you going to launch? Where are you at in this process? And, if there's anyone here, how can we help?
A lot of questions, but okay, I'm going to answer them all. First of all, the model, as you said, it's the big piece on and really looking at paradigm shift is thinking about co-living. And there's a unique opportunity that we've got is that 5 years ago, Youthful City started to look at the national youth housing strategy. And all we could find was that we've got 8 months of maybe, opportunity for housing for young people at colleges and universities. That was the national youth housing strategy. And that's not even actually listed anywhere, but that's it. And then you're on your own. And right now, the cost of housing, the cost of rental, the cost of everything has gone skyrocketing. And young people at the beginning of their careers don't have the investment to really get ahead. So they're moving out further and further away from downtown. So now we've got a downtown problem where we can't actually get young workforce downtown. So what we looked at is an office vacancy problem, a downtown revitalization problem, and a really urgent crisis to get young people a more affordable housing downtown. And it all kind of zones in on the opportunity to put co-living in adapted office buildings. Office buildings are already there. That's a really good environmental footprint. If it's already there, you don't have to build it again. No more concrete, no more glass, like it's already there. 2, it's cheap. So I don't know the BC numbers, you might know them, Lisa, but I just talked to the city of Toronto. They're underwriting new housing at $500,000 a unit, and they're not sure whether they're going to hit that number. Our numbers say that we can do it for around $50,000 to $60,000 a unit. And even if we're off by 100%, that's $100,000 a unit, which is still 1/5 the price of what it's going to cost to build a new housing unit in Toronto. And the key and the really fascinating part, obviously, I've spent my life working with young people, but this is a uniquely great opportunity because of young people, because they're already living in co-living. They're already living in houses stacked up with 7 bedrooms, sharing 1 bathroom and 1 kitchen. The really great opportunity with this venture is, as I tell lots of young people, is someone else is going to clean the bathroom. So they're like, great, sign me up. This is going to be fantastic. But we're looking at rents of about $1,200 a month for Vancouver and Toronto, which is about half of what it costs for a 1-bedroom apartment. And the key thing is, it's because of the shared services. You've got a private room with a lock, and you've got it's a small room, but you've got access to a kitchen, you've got access to bathrooms, you've got access to laundry. And I think the really important part is, this is a sad stat, but one of the loneliest segments of the Canadian population is young people. And that's because we're pushing them apart. We're separating them, we're dividing them, we're getting them to further and further away. And the opportunity of co-living actually builds a community. So it's cheaper, it's faster, and arguably it's better. And for that generation at that stage, it'll get them downtown, and it'll get those workers into jobs in a way that we aren't seeing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess some might say, well, isn't that just kind of, and I don't actually feel this way, but I just want to pose this to you because you've probably been asked this question or maybe along your journey. Isn't this just kind of warehousing young people? Shouldn't they have, their own bathroom? Shouldn't they have more living space? Shouldn't they? Is there some kind of, and so how do you respond to the, I remember when I was on Mayor Victoria, and we were debating minimum unit sizes and what's a healthy minimum unit size, and does every bedroom need a window, and all of these things that are legitimate livability concerns. So just wanting to know how you balance some of that.
Yeah, that's not the feedback we're getting from young people, which is our priority. They need to save some money right now. I don't know, I actually often use the example of a hotel chain called Citizen M. Oliver might know that one as well, but it's a beautiful hotel with very small rooms that are all prefabricated. And it allows you to have really nice common spaces, and small but very nice private spaces. And that's the combination. So no, it's not warehousing. And that's, the other way to put it is, okay, let's start building a lot of homes, 500,000, and give them all to young people. We kind of did that after the war, World War II, right? Those young people coming back from the war got homes. But what are we doing for this generation of young people? We're telling them to stay in their parents' bedroom or basement because that's all they've got.
Yeah, no, yeah, really, really good point. And I'm glad to hear. My impression is that this would be welcome. And some of the spaces that show in your video, like, yeah, this is where I currently live, and it's completely inappropriate living conditions. So, this cohab doesn't seem like warehousing at all. It seems like a better than a basement, or better than living with 8 people in a space where it's potentially unsanitary and unsafe.
Yeah, and it's next to transit. It's down, the idea of downtown living that's inexpensive, and with a group of young people that you can create a community around, so you're not lonely.
For sure. Oliver, over to your solutions. So Intelligent City has developed a series of technologies. You're an urban housing technology company. This is the question you probably get asked this every day, but I think the folks here would be interested to hear your thoughts. How do you scale? And not just for Intelligent City, but how do we scale so that we don't just have 1 or 2 or 3 housing technology companies in the country and across North America, but how do you scale up your own company, and how do we scale up a different way of building housing?
Yeah, great question. So productization is really a key thing in everything we do. And I want to say, by definition, we're a housing technology company, but we're doing this really, as I said before, to empower people to live better and to, respond to things that Robert is envisioning. And I think many of us are envisioning is not just, changing the building systems or how we construct buildings or how we change the paradigm from construction to assembly and so forth, but really, how do we create better product? How do we create buildings that really genuinely empower people to live better, to provide an alternative for the new younger generations that are there, but also a lot of people that didn't grow up with the sort of sense of entitlement that they deserve to have a single family home. We have so many immigrants in this country that come from Asia, Europe, South America, and all over the place. And for them, it's just second nature. They want to live in a vibrant city, and they want to participate in the creation of sort of great community and a great enlightened society in a way. And so what we do to get to scale is that we spent years sort of trying to determine what kind of buildings are actually needed, what kind of mixed use buildings with the right amount of common amenity, with the right layouts of apartments to get to efficiency, to make them affordable, but also make them livable, right? Have proper access to daylight and ventilation and to the outdoors and all those things. So we designed the product first, spent years designing the product, building the first few buildings, living with those buildings, understanding it, and then we developed the technology to enable these products. So scale comes from ultimately 2 things: repeatability, right? That's absolutely important, because when you really study housing carefully, you realize that to some extent, many, like 90% of buildings or housing projects, have a lot of similarities in the needs and in the definitions. And we can build technologies to accommodate that, so that from the same kit of parts, from the same manufacturing line, we can create just the right diversity of product. So it works in rental, which is different from condominiums, that it works for one developer who has a different brand definition than another. It works from one community that sense themselves to be different. It works in one climate like Vancouver, but it also works in Toronto. It works in Los Angeles. It can work in Atlanta, Georgia, right? So you have different climate, you have different physics. And so we worked on sort of trying to align these issues with each other, so that we just build enough adaptability to serve these different markets, but have basically a common shared DNA of technologies that allows us to scale up, so that we can build a factory, that we can build the supporting software technologies to facilitate this variety of projects. So we believe that the previous ideas of prefab have always been sort of countering the bespoke individual buildings with a one-fits-all solution, and it doesn't work either. Like, nobody wants to live in a box and be sort of in only one way. People want choice, and people want to live a good life. So the technology, the software, and the manufacturing technologies need to have enough adaptability in them to accommodate the needs of the market without making things unnecessarily complex and complicated. So that has been our journey all along, is find these solutions to make things as simple as possible, but not any simpler than they need to be to prevent sort of the larger things. So it is really in that understanding the need, the market need, and the product that you can offer, and pair that with sort of an industry 4.0 paradigm that ultimately is scalable and repeatable, right? So what we're working on right now is the factory that we have here in BC. We're already working on creating essentially the next version replica, so we can put that on the ground in the Ontario market in the next couple of years. And so that's where scale comes from. That helps us with supply chain. We can buy a better pricing. We can deliver with consistent manufacturing quality and tolerances. And then maybe last, to get to scale, is also that we don't have, like, individual solutions that people are worried about, but we've worked now for years to get everything first designed and engineered, then tested, then failed, and we incinerated a lot of our prototypes. We burned them up, we crushed them, we structurally tested them, did all the failing you can possibly do to get to the right solutions, and then we got them independently third-party verified. So we have now a fully CSA certified building system for the superstructure of the building and for the envelope, always meeting Passive House standards, all coming from the same kit of parts, right? So that's sort of the journey of providing certainty on one end and verification, and yet enabling just enough adaptability so that we can meet the broader market needs.
That's great. I want to broadcast that message across the construction sector, because in the past fall, I guess last year, when I was working in the Premier's office, we were working on, and still now at BC Builds, working on thinking about how do we standardize designs, how do we standardize processes, how do we standardize zoning, how do we standardize enough, but without losing that adaptability. And one of the resistances, there are a number of them, but one of the resistances to prefabricated factory manufactured homes is that cookie cutter notion or the ATCO trailer vision. And so what you've described, the work you're doing at Intelligent City, is none of the above. These are, let me just see if you agree with this. They're kind of custom homes that are completely repeatable.
Yeah, I mean, it's the old concept, it's been around for 30 years and it's used in other industries, called mass customization, right? So you have consistent manufacturing. And you would just think, when we talk about productization, any other industry you would look at, you realize the products are not identical. Be that you're shopping for shoes or electronics or cars or whatever, everybody has technology platforms from which they can scale into a number of different model types, a number of different accessories, a customization, and all of a sudden, before you know it, you have a million variations possibly coming from that actually very disciplined kit of part and from that shared platform, right? And so that's what we've looked at, and that's what we've developed, that you can create the variation, but you also get that repeatability and that consistency and that scale.
So glad you repeated that word, because when you said productization at the beginning of your answer, I was like, what did he say? But then I didn't want to interrupt you to ask. So productization, that's a takeaway for me, for sure, and probably for many of us. Thanks for that. I know it is 4:30 and I promise we're going to go to questions soon, but I've got a couple more of my own. We've got one question in the chat. So now's your invitation to share your questions. We might have a couple in the Q&A as well. All right, we do. But before we go to those, keep them coming in. Let's talk about de-risking innovation. So in the Cohab video and on the website, I'm going to say this out loud, and then you can tell us how you're going to get there. And so the Youthful Cities has said that by March of 2025, so a year from now, they're going to have 7,000 of these units, these cohab units up and running. So tell us a little bit about how are you going to do that? And then the general question, which I'll ask Oliver as well. And I was in Kelowna last Friday for a fantastic session put on by the Canadian Home Builders of BC, the Okanagan chapter. It was an event called Home Sweet Home. And I had the pleasure of facilitating a roundtable on de-risking innovation. Lots of good ideas, very difficult to do. So in these 7,000 units 1 year from now, how are you going to de-risk what you need to innovate and get those open for young people in Toronto?
Well, yeah, hopefully young people in Victoria too. You asked me what we need from the audience, and we need 500,000 square feet in Victoria of office space that's vacant right now. So that would be a start. And the way to do it, it's, you know, different but still similar to what Oliver's talking about, is once we are working with an architecture partner who's using AI technology to rapidly map out units within empty office spaces. So literally within minutes, we can tell whether we can build these units in office spaces and whether we have the right distribution. So our model is about 50% of the space in office goes towards private rooms, and the other 50% goes to common uses like kitchens. So part one, we need to find the space, and we've already started to identify buildings that are fully vacant, which is our priority right now. Second priority is to look at office buildings that have a 5-floor stack of empty space so that we can create something in those spaces. So finding the building and we're working on with Cushman & Wakefield, engineering firm TMP, and Arcade Architects. We're working on a kind of rapid building assessment tool. So we'll be able to do this across Canada to map out how much space could be converted to these co-living units. Second phase is, and this is back to your old job, we need to get municipal approval. So one of our jobs is to get in, talk to as many people inside cities who are in charge of planning and zoning, and say, here is a solution. Everyone is saying we got to build more housing. This building exists. Office buildings are built for leaseholder improvements. We have a model which is a systemized way of doing those improvements. We're literally putting up drywall, and we're going to call this a room versus an office. That's the change. So if you can get over that paradigm, we need to find a way to make sure we streamline the zoning process. Checking with some big developers who do a lot of this, their estimation is once the approval happens, we could have the construction done and people in the rooms within 6 to 9 months. So that if you run the numbers, I got 3 months to convince cities this is a good idea and that the zoning's going to, and then get through the zoning part. And then we can build those units. But the space is there. We just need to, you know, and we're going to make a good offer to the owners of the building. So they're going to make money in space that's currently not making money. That's the other part of the model, of course, is the owners of the buildings get paid. So that's how we're going to get to that number. But it means governments have to play, developers have to play, and ultimately youth have been there willing to play for a long, long time. So that's going to be the easiest part of the process.
All right, perfect. That's great. I'm going to go to Oliver in just a minute, but Kathy will remember when I was mayor, I was constantly calling meetings and handing out action items. This is not a meeting, and I'm no longer the mayor, but we do have the executive director of UDI Capital Region here. So Kathy, I think you can rustle up 500,000 square feet of vacant office space in the region. I don't know if she's even allowed to come on because she's not an official part. Oh, there she is. Okay, Kathy, what do you got for us? Got any takers?
Well, I could absolutely put it out there for sure. I know the people to talk to, so happy to help you out, Robert.
Perfect. Okay, awesome. All right, Oliver, how do you are taking some tremendous risks, as we've heard. You're kind of pioneering. That's what your mission or your vision statement, pioneering a sustainable future, one building at a time. So you're a pioneer. How do you de-risk the money that you're putting in, the money that your investors are putting in? How do you de-risk innovation in a way that's going to satisfy those who are investing, but also get to the solutions you want at scale?
Yeah, I think the I mean, again, appreciate the question because there's a lot at stake, and we put our our capital behind it, our careers behind it. At the end, innovation is not just a good idea. Innovation requires a process, and innovation requires a tremendous amount of collaboration. And so that is something that we build as a culture in our company, that we all basically, constantly trying and making discoveries and de-risking, finding possibilities of failure, addressing those and embrace that to some extent. And then working with the industries, working with the best minds out there, and also have now been fortunate enough to have clients who have a similar mindset. They feel like the old ways are just not sustainable anymore. It does not allow them to scale their businesses. They feel they run into the same problems over and over again, and are just deeply frustrated by that. And they want a better paradigm, and so they're willing to take the risk of new technologies in return for a better path forward. And so there's a lot of collaboration, a lot of conversation to address their risks from anything from financing, funding issues to approval issues to any concerns that they may have, right? So one is collaboration. The second one, as I said, when you take a product approach, you don't ship something out that's half-baked, right? So you have to, like with any product you would buy, think about it. You pick it up, and the day of purchase, you want it to be fully functional. That's your expectation. And with buildings, we don't have that expectation. We have an agreement that they sort of work, but not really, and there's trouble, and you do have to, after occupancy, still trying to fix things. And so with buildings need to work. And so we've spent a lot of time working through everything where there could be potential failure, and then going through, as I said, testing, the certification of it all. So that is a big part of de-risking what needs to be done. The third one is really, the engagement with government agencies to make sure that there's alignment there. Because for us, the biggest risk right now is if we develop technologies on the basis of the promise that we see new mass timber building codes coming, and what you've just mentioned, the province wanted to go and simplify the framework, the planning frameworks across. That is something that we embrace, and the more we can do it, the more you can get to a paradigm where at the end of the day, there shouldn't be, if you do one building and then there's like one block down the road on the same urban artery, you put in the identical same building. Maybe you change the color and you change the balcony pattern, right? But other than that, it's the same building. Why do I have to apply for a 2-year rezoning process? Why do I have to go through a 4 or 6 month building permit process, right? There should be, like with any products, there's something called homologation, which means, like any car that comes out of a factory does not need individual checks. It follows the paradigm of everything that's been designed. That is how you de-risk also investment, because now clients can come to me, I can give them a fixed price, I can guarantee it's going to work out, and they have no risk in the project because I carry the risk for them, and I can because the framework has been created for me to operate in that construct.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that we discussed last fall in these various roundtables that we convened about standardization. If you've got a standardized prototyped design that works on one site, can't you just have it pre-approved for any site that has those same conditions, full stop? So that actually leads us, oh, sorry, did you want to add something, Oliver?
I just want to add, and I think we have to overcome the thinking that standardization means poor quality. Exactly. Our argument is that standardization will lead us to much better quality because we get tightly integrated, designed, beautiful solutions. Like with any product that you would have, you would expect that quality to be built into the product that you acquire.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And one of this real analogy came to me during this work last fall when we were beginning the conversation about standardization, and nobody walks around and says, oh, this weekend I'm going to go buy a standardized prefabricated car. They just go and buy their car, right? Yeah. And yet we talk about standardized prefabricated housing as if it's different than housing, but we don't talk about any other or our computers or whatever. CD players aren't a thing anymore, I realize. But products are products, and if we can start to think of homes as products, productization as we learned from you, I think we're going to be further ahead and more quickly. But that the last part about, so okay, how do we, to both of you raised the need for municipalities to come along and embrace some of these solutions. So the question, first question in the Q&A that I'm going to go to is, when it comes to scaling of these technologies, innovative approaches, how can we convince the municipal quote gatekeepers, the questioner's words, not mine, to say, hey, once this is proven at one site, we can rubber stamp, apply to various sites. So basically the statement that I just said, but put back to a question like you, how do we do that work? How do we convince municipalities to come along as partners in innovation? So Robert, I'll turn to you, and then Oliver, I know you've said it's important, but any ideas for the how? How do we do it?
Yeah, well, I think it's a combination of conversation and probably construction. So that, we just need to keep having those conversations, trying to get into new paradigms. The good news is that everyone knows it's a crisis, and everyone, I think, heart is in the right place, that we need to find new solutions to get us these housing units a lot faster. So that's going in our favor. There's obviously lots of funding coming from different levels of government to inspire municipalities to move faster. So that's also good. And I think every time we construct something that we can productize, we need to get those gatekeepers to those sites so they can see it with their own eyes. And then it gets easier the next time.
Excellent. Oliver, what are your strategies?
So we've been working with government agencies, people that are in charge of writing building codes. So when we had the emergence of the encapsulated mass timber code, I had the fortune to be part of some, I think, very important sort of sessions and activities there. So create a framework really that simplifies and unifies building code across the country, across the continent, so that we can have really scalable solutions in there. And then also take the burden away from those that have to make approvals. And I want to quote a key player in the building official's office in Toronto, for example, who said, like, our problem is always that every building, and I want to repeat that, is an individually engineered solution. That means we have to check everything all the time. If it's not any longer an individually solution, but you come with a CSA certified system that takes up a big part of a building, like in our case, we make these large scale floor panels with integrated ventilation, integrated electrical ducting, and the whole unit with fire rating and acoustic rating, etc., has a CSA certification. So now a chief building official actually doesn't have to look at it, right? That burden is taken away from the official and allows them to focus on other things. And so we need to reduce the complexity of the approval processes in these to facilitate a better process. And then that can then become a new business as usual way. You don't have to inspect the fridge that you install. You don't have to inspect the washer because they have certification on them, right? And you install them. In the same way, we have to build buildings that are assembled from certified parts instead of individually constructed.
Beautiful. And you know what, just like the Youthful Cities solution of Cohab is solving the problem for vacant office building owners by generating revenue in their offices, municipal staff across the province, and I imagine across the country, are completely overwhelmed and overrun just because there's so much activity. And so if we can take some of that work off their hands, off their plates, it's a win-win, right? The building officials will probably be happier as well once they get used to this new normal that we're going to create. All right, there's another question here. We haven't touched on it yet, but I think both of you mentioned it a little bit, or at least Oliver did. And Robert, if you're working with young people, obviously this is a concern for them as well. Climate change. So the question is, it's a key factor in this discussion, given that climate change is a key factor in this discussion and that a connected urban ecosystem is key to long-term health and resilience. Please comment on your visions around this. So for each of you, how do the solutions that you're proposing with respect to housing kind of co-solve or multi-solve for the climate crisis as well?
Can I really depress you for a second?
I don't know. Okay, it's Friday afternoon. I guess, yes, you can depress us because, no, it's okay because it's Friday afternoon.
I'll try to come up with a solution for it. But young people don't care as much about climate change right now as we want them to. In a study we just did at Youthful Cities, we asked young people, if there's one issue you want cities to deal with right now, what is it? 50% said affordability, and 2.9% said climate change. And that's how bad the affordability crisis is. And we're really counting on that younger generation to carry the torch and fix the world for us and fix the environment. But they are really hurting financially. So they just don't have any brain space to get into these kinds of solutions. That said, so the solution part is and this has been said by other people, not me, most of the housing that we need over the next 10 years is in buildings that are already built. Like that's going to be the fastest way to get housing done. And if an office building is already built and it's vacant, those systems are there. We're not ripping the systems out. We're totally different than an office to residential conversion model, which rips out the systems and starts all over again. We're going to reuse the systems. Because of the co-living model, you don't need to rip it all out. So we're saving there. We're not wasting. We're basically the first 2 hours for sure. We're definitely reducing and we're reusing. And if we can recycle anything, we certainly will. But that's the environmental model for us is less. Let's use what's there and make it work harder.
Absolutely. All of it. That is quite depressing. And when Greta Thunberg sat out in front of the Swedish Parliament and invited everyone to join her, and we saw those Fridays for Future and the marches all around the world, that kind of got cut off by the pandemic. But there was certainly, the affordability issues hadn't hit so much at that point, and we saw youth around the world really mobile, and certainly in Canada, certainly in British Columbia, really mobilized around climate change. And so it's interesting, the survey results: 50% concerned about affordability, 2.9% concerned about climate change. I think if that question had been asked 3 or 4 years ago, we would have had very different results. And so that, I think, behooves all of us to get this housing crisis sorted as quickly as possible, so that we can, so that young people can have the basis for a strong foundation for themselves, and then turn their minds once again to the wider concerns. Oliver, climate change, I mean, your solution is the answer, one of them for sure. So tell us a bit about your vision and how that fits.
So it was climate change was a big concern for us when we started the company way over a decade ago. And, just I think where we're at right now, and I want to share some good news because there's always so much bad news about climate change. But before I go a little bit more into detail, we can actually create life cycle, carbon neutral, affordable rental housing today. So how do we get there? What do we need to do? I think start is a realization that right now global carbon emissions that we have, not 39% come from buildings, and that breaks down into parts. That is about what happened during construction, so the what we call the embodied carbons in our sector, and then what happens during the operation of buildings for heating, for cooling, turning lights on and off, and so forth, right? But that is 39% of carbon emissions. And then there's sort of the other part, the other elephant in the room here is that if buildings are not designed smartly, and they force people into cars because they need to commute, and that then can actually make our sector responsible for all of up to 65% of carbon emissions. So that's a pretty depressing stat, right? So we broke that down for ourselves and looked at it and saying, what can we do about the embodied carbon, the operational carbon, and the so-called behavioral carbon emissions in buildings? So let's start with the embodied carbon. Our choice of materials to use mass timber was because it comes from a renewable resource, right? That we have actually abundantly available in Canada, and we're only using 50% of our managed forest right now. Huge value add opportunity. And when trees grow, they sequester carbon, and they store carbon permanently. For as long as you don't demolish these buildings, you have carbon sequestration happening in these buildings and stored. And the beautiful thing about mass timber as a product, it is highly machinable, and we can make very large component up to 45 feet long that are precision machined and assembled with a tolerance of 1 millimeter. And as I mentioned before, the combination of mass timber and that sort of industry 4.0 paradigm allows for an industry that can scale. And the effect of that is better supply chain management, lower cost of construction, more accurate assembly, et cetera, right? So by answering to the embodied carbon challenge, there is an answer that's scalable. Second part is the operational carbon. That's basically all your heating and cooling loads and lighting and operating the building. If we use, and that we do that with the components that we make, everything is built to fully integrated envelope systems that meet passive house standards, which allow us to reduce the energy needs of a building consistently by up to 90% over a conventional building. So you reduce the carbon emissions, and at the same time, you make it a lot cheaper to operate these buildings. And they are not more expensive. The myth is passive house is expensive. It's only expensive if you do it as a one-off, and the people who build it have never done it before. But if that's what you do day in, day out, right? That's what we manufacture. The price is actually very competitive. And then thirdly, as I mentioned, you have to give people a product that they're happy to adopt urban living, right? So that they live in cities that want to be in that 15-minute city. They don't want a car anymore. I've lived in a number of cities in my life where I was really happy to not having to own a car. And so I walk to work, right? I can rapid transit. I have a restaurant close by. I have everything I need. And now I get people out of cars. So if you start addressing all those three issues and then relate them to solutions, thinking that's scalable, all of a sudden you actually have something where, there is a response to this. So we can build from the grade slab up carbon neutral buildings today, as long as we don't put cars in a concrete parkade below ground.
Get rid of parking minimums everywhere.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. All right, I'm going to batch the last three questions all at once. Two of them are, I think, mostly directed to Robert, and then one is for both of you. So because the SIP people are going to come back on at 5 o'clock or 4:55 and wrap us up. So in 3 minutes or less, Robert, how do you expect to limit tenancy to young people? Second question is, here in Victoria, we're in an earthquake zone. Some of these buildings might not be seismically sound. Is there a fix for this? And then a question to both of you. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's a statement, then a question, but it has to do with affordability for people who are precariously housed or facing homelessness. This person believes that we need thousands of rent geared to income housing units quickly. Do you agree? And if so, how would we make that happen? So those are the questions, and you can weave anything you want into your closing remarks as part of that as well. So Robert, to you before you forget the first two. And then
I got it.
You got it.
So we won't be limiting it, but obviously co-living has been a very popular form of housing for seniors for a long time, and of course, and there are lots of communities that say it's sort of seniors only, and they're able to do that. So I think our goal is to communicate what this is and make sure that we do a great job. And if others want to join, I think when we've talked to people, even federally, about the co-living model, it's not exclusively for young people. If we can do it for young people, show how great it's going to be, I think it can be applied to a lot of populations. We've had people ask us about university student populations. We've had people ask us about international students. we talked about refugees. Other precarious populations could use co-living as a really, really good way of solving the housing crisis. So I sort of wrapped in the answer there for those two. Earthquake zones, I don't know, over to you, Oliver.
Yeah, maybe really quickly. I think, I love the idea of co-living, co-housing. So, from a platform, we need to enable those emerging typologies. I think that's very important because there's a very diverse needs. It's very different for young people than for seniors, right? For professional couples, etc. So we need to have really good models available. And in order to the other question, scale, how do we get to scale and build many thousands of homes quickly? I think it needs to be an effort between governments and industry to come together and come up with frameworks that allow us to scale with certainty and deliver a really good product. Then we can actually just create thousands of units quickly as an industry.
Perfect. And then just on the rent geared to income element of the question, that does really take government investment and providing operating subsidies to buildings where necessary, or making sure that the rent structure in any building has a range of rents where people who can afford to pay closer to market are paying that in order to help subsidize the operational costs of the building, so that others who can't afford to pay that can pay less. And certainly BC Housing's Community Housing Fund program does exactly just that. So we are at 4:55 sharp. Never want to be late. So I'm going to hand it back to Ben or Kathy or whomever's coming on to tell us about all the people who helped make this event happen. Before I sign off, I just really want to give a shout out and thanks to Robert and Oliver for your time, your insight, and most importantly, the work you're actually doing out there in the world. So if we could give you a round of applause and we were in a room right now, I'm sure it would be thunderous. So thank you so much.
You've been a great moderator, Lisa, as well. Thank you for all the questions.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Great. So thank you to the speakers. Thank you to the attendees. Thank you to the Urban Development Institute Capital Region for sponsoring this important conversation. Thank you to our presenting sponsor, RBC, and our Catalyst sponsor, Van City, for supporting Rising Economy 2024 in partnership with Pacifican. Thank you to the attendees. This is the last session of the 2024 Rising Economy Conference. This and the other virtual sessions will be posted to our website and YouTube in the coming weeks. Please follow South Island Prosperity Partnership on social media to continue the conversation. Thank you and goodbye.